This meeting is being recorded.
I think that's my cue.
We could wait for a little bit. We're still ahead of time. I wouldn't want to start yet.
Okay, yeah, okay. We'll just give everyone a couple seconds.
Yeah, I was sitting on this Zoom chat. If you can see those, I've been chatting you there. We could probably wait to start for about until we get to 50 people, because we have about 150 signed up for today. So I don't want to get started with 20 or so.
No worries.
Eric, you can mute yourself for a minute if you want, because we're going to wait for another minute or two. Hey everyone, hey, we'll just give everybody about a minute to get settled in. It's just 12 o'clock, so we'll get your grab a glass of water or whatever you want to drink for this next hour, and we'll get started in a few minutes here.
Welcome everybody. Let me just get some stuff pulled up. I know there's still some people joining, but we've got a good amount on now. So we'll go ahead and kick things off. Welcome everybody to the highly anticipated DFWIMA Web3 Into the Metaverse Roundtable discussion. If you're anything like me, you know next to nothing about the metaverse, so I am particularly excited to learn some things from this one. The metaverse is a cutting-edge technology, and it's an overlap between our virtual and physical lives, and promises to be that next step in the future that will allow brands to advertise in an immersive environment. How are brands going to adjust? What will the content look like? All these questions are soon to be answered by our expert panel. But before we introduce our thought leaders today, I wanted to remind you of a few upcoming events. So this is not an April Fool's joke. Join us April 1st for Rangers opening weekend. Spend the evening mingling with your industry friends in a beautiful suite at Globe Life Field. If you haven't been, it's awesome. As the Rangers and their exciting new roster take on the New York Yankees. There's nothing better than beer, baseball, and friends on a Friday evening, trust me. Also mark your calendars for the annual EMO Awards on April 28th. We're going to be resuming the awards in person this year at the Henry, and we're so excited to see you there. If you haven't had a chance to go to the Henry yet, I can assure you the food and drinks are fabulous. Don't forget to get your submissions in by the end of the month if you are submitting anything, and check out our social pages, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or email community@dfwima.org for more info. And so without further ado, let's introduce our panelists today. So first up, we have Dale Alexander. A longtime agency creative, Dale has spent most of his career in the world of entertainment and sports marketing. He most recently was the VP of creative for the Dallas Mavs before jumping into the Web3 world as creative lead at Zealous. Zealous is a new venture-backed blockchain creative studio, among many other things. Zealous partners with entertainers and properties to guide and build things with them in the blockchain space. In his spare time, Dale performs improv comedy with his wife. That is way cool. And he enjoys pushing where his curiosity leads him, and he's always down for a good riff session. Next up, we have Alejandro Arango. With 10 years of experience as a content writer and a fulfilling journey as marketing leader for Bike Exchange Colombia and a digital transformation consultant for several startups, Alejandro is a full-time DAO contributor since 2021, always looking to tell great stories and make complex topics accessible to anyone. So for me, this is a complex topic. Look forward to hearing from you, Alejandro. Also joining us is the founder of Parachute and Jump, Jeff Kaufman. Jeff spent 15 years building digital and social strategy for brands and recently made the transition into Web3. Jump is a tokenized Web3 community for those in the marketing and advertising industry. In addition to Jump and Parachute, he is a collaborator and advisor at Seed Club, a DAO that operates as a social token incubator and accelerator. Let's also welcome Blaine McGaffigan. Blaine is a marketer with a background in strategy, inbound, and content marketing. He's currently the marketing manager at Medium Giant. As a longtime gamer, Blake has witnessed the metaverse take shape in real time. He explores the metaverse and crypto through the lens of gaming, technology, community, and storytelling. He also hosts the Comic Club podcast, a comic book and graphic novel book club. And last but not least, we have our very own Chris Martin as today's moderator. Chris currently serves as our DFWIMA board president and regional VP of sales at MIQ. If you know Chris at all, you know that he's all in when it comes to anything Web3, NFT, and social tokens. He's also a DAO contributor as well. And I think that is enough from me. So let's get into Web3. I will hand it over to you, Chris.
Awesome. Thank you, Erica. So yeah, I'm really excited to chat with everybody today about this. I know for some of you, it'll probably be the first time you've listened in on one of these panels or talked about Web3 and the metaverse in general. So all of us here have been involved in this for a little while. I'll kind of jump right to it though. We'll first kind of want to break down like what is Web3, what is the metaverse, and then kind of get a little bit more later in sense of what makes that special and then around the community, and then also how to get started. So hopefully you'll have a lot of learnings here, and we're going to share some other educational information with you as a follow-up too as well. So don't worry about it. Your head might be spinning a little bit by the end of this, but I think with this panel here, you're going to see that we'll be able to kind of bring you along and kind of create that path for you all to kind of find your way into Web3 if that's what you desire. So to get things kicked off, what is Web3, right? So like, I'm going to kind of just pick on somebody here. I'll just pick Jeff for now. Let's go with Jeff. Jeff, why don't you give us a little bit of your insight or just your kind of your lay of the land of like Web3 and what that means?
Absolutely. Welcome everybody as we kick this off. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, we're good. Web3. So there's kind of two big new words here in the title of this sort of lunch and learn, if you will, Web3 and Metaverse. So we'll start with Web3, and then maybe we'll go around the horn a little bit on the Metaverse side to try to give a quick introduction. For Web3, I think the way to think about it has a lot more structure. I think we're a lot more aligned on what that term actually means. And then on the Metaverse side, it gets a little fuzzier and it's kind of hard to pin down. But on the Web3 side, naturally with Web3, we think of Web 1 and Web 2 and then Web 3. So there's this natural progression to follow. So when we think of Web 1, this is mid 90s. This is, think, static web pages, search. So we call this the era of read, where you logged on online and you just can read stuff and you can search around, but it's not super interactive. And then when we move to Web 2, this is the era of social and mobile and more engagement and back and forth between the people that are using the internet. And so we call this write. So we've kind of moved from read-only web to write, where you can actually, leave comments, post videos, post photos, right? And then Web 3, that key word really is ownership. That's kind of the category that we're moving into. And it's not that we're replacing the previous versions. It's more of like a stack that we're building on. So we've moved from being able to write to the web or to read the web, to then write to it and affect it, to then own certain parts of it. And that's super important because previous to Web 3, really the only ownership mechanism, or the only thing anybody could really own on the internet, we've had it, and it's domain names, right? And so we've been able to own digital assets, but really just domain names. Web 3 starts to unlock a whole world of basically digital property rights. And when we layer on digital property rights to the internet, we get a whole new internet. So that's the way I like to think about Web3: read, write, own. And then on the Metaverse side, I don't know. I'm going to kick it over to Blaine. Blaine and maybe Dale. I know Alejandra has a ton of thoughts on this as well, but let's go to try to just make an attempt at defining the Metaverse, because that's where things get really wild.
Real quick though, before we do that, does anybody want to add? Great analogy, Jeff, of kind of like Web 1, 2, and 3, because that kind of sets the stage for the conversation. So anybody else though want to add anything else to that? Another like analogy, visual for somebody?
Not necessarily an analogy, but I do want to add a gigantic component of this whole thing. It's that in Web3, when you can own part of the internet, you can also build upon it. You can build about the little corner of every platform or every service you own. You could very easily just fork it and create an entirely new business model based on a single component of the platform you love. Say, for example, there's an NFT marketplace, to say anything, and you want to build your community around people who own a specific token. You can extract the data from the NFT marketplace and know exactly who owns the token and build your community from it. So the composability of it all is a huge component of what makes Tree unique.
Yeah, that's great. And just to one thing to kind of put a bow on that is, for Web3, a lot of this is technology enabled by blockchain. So like that's one thing we just want to make sure that we kind of all hit on, because there's been a lot of buzz with crypto and blockchain for years now and things like that, and NFTs more recently. So that's kind of the underlying technology that really enables all of this sharing or ownership. Just so we're kind of clarifying that, because we're going to get into the Metaverse, which is going to blow your mind a little bit more. But just to let everybody know that that's the main difference from that, ownership aspect of like Web 2, where everything that you put out on the internet, you don't really get a monetary value in exchange for. But in Web 3, what it's allowing you to is actually have that ownership and monetize your individuality through those different areas of being a part of a community, engaging in those areas, or it can be an ad, anything like that, but there will actually be an exchange in value. So that's really the kind of flips it on its head from Web 2 to Web 3, but just that underlying tech. So, but as we kind of pivot here, who wants to kind of kick off the Metaverse discussion? Who wants to give a good little definition of that? Blaine, go for it.
Yeah, I'll take it. I was doing a lot of research before this and I found a bunch of different definitions, and I'll kind of throw them out there fast and hopefully some of the other panelists can kind of comment on them. There's the one we all imagine when we hear metaverse, right? If you've seen Ready Player One, if you've read Snow Crash, you're thinking you're putting on a VR headset. It's a persistent 3D virtual world. There's avatars. It's connecting all these things. That is, the future of it. That's the peak, the furthest reaches, and we are still away from that. But at a base level, the metaverse are digital spaces that connect people. And so I like to think about it of what we're currently using, right? If I'm going to go meet up with my friends somewhere, you're going to have a group chat. You're going to have message things. At work, we use Slack. Then we use Discord for non-work. And then we use things like tools like Zoom to sort of connect together. Once we start to move into virtual world aspects of it, into gaming, into Fortnite, into Roblox, we're seeing that a lot with, gamers and the next generation, and even many people in our generation as well. It just kind of enriches that experience even more so. But there's one more thing that I think ran across this and I find it quite fascinating. It says the metaverse is not a place, it is a time when our digital lives mean more to us than our physical lives. And that could mean all sorts of things, from monetary or whatever. And you think about how work has moved so much to digital. You think about how much entertainment has moved digital. You think about, and for some people, that might have been 20 years ago playing World of Warcraft with their friends. They might already have crossed that chasm. And for many of us, the pandemic has fueled this change. And that's why we're hearing metaverse come up so much, because we are now at a place where technology is kind of catching up to the vision of a lot of the literature and a lot of the tech where we want it to go. And then again, like I said, the pandemic has made it a necessity for a lot of people, where it has fueled sort of the digital, advanced at 10 years in the span of 2 years. So those are kind of things I wanted to throw out there, and you can kind of look at it in your own lives, the way you interact with people digitally to then meet up with them, maybe to go play games with them at night with your friends, or to go meet in physical. And that's great too.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's awesome. I like that. What about for some people like Emma, I mentioned just, give me an example. Somebody have a good example of like kind of a Web3 experience. It can be with the metaverse, or it could just be in general, but anybody have like a quick little example for that to kind of help people visualize those?
Yeah, I can give a quick example. Probably the most popular example that people are connecting to and engaging with right now is OpenSea.io. I dropped that in the chat. And it's basically a marketplace to buy and sell NFTs. You can kind of think of it as eBay for NFTs. And when I say NFTs, that means non-fungible token. It's built on the blockchain, so it fits into that category of Web3. So that's probably the best example. To give some context around that, about a year ago, OpenSea was doing in the low millions in terms of revenue and sales. And fast forward 1 year later, OpenSea is doing billions a month. So the explosion and attention on OpenSea has just been massive. So I highly encourage that as if you're just wanting to interact with a Web3 product and a Web3 property, go interact with OpenSea, connect your wallet, play around with it. You don't have to buy anything, but you can start to get a feel and use some Web3 tech.
Yeah, I agreed on that. That's for sure. It's a learning curve, but it's a lot of fun. Before we kind of pivot to the next topic, I kind of want to throw something over to Dale. Like, do you want to add anything to kind of what, the other panelists here all mentioned, or something else you kind of want to spin off of and riff with? Because I think there's, your perspective I want to kind of get to a little bit more into. Then just kind of open that door for you.
Sure. I'll start off at the beginning. The term metaverse, I was a huge fan of cyberpunk literature, back in high school and college. And so that's really the origin of the term metaverse comes from a book called Snow Crash. And the most baseline definition of it is a virtual platform for social exchange. So in these books, it was, jacking into the metaverse, and I think the Matrix to a degree is an analog for that. Snow Crash is a big inspiration for that. And so if you have the baseline definition, virtual platform for social exchange, congratulations, everyone. We're in the metaverse or a form of it right now. So pat yourself on the shoulder, go mint yourself an NFT because you're doing it and you have been doing it. But I think it's where the complexities of the metaverse, that is the future. And I think that there's a potentially dystopian view and a utopian view of it. Dystopian is everyone desires and loves themselves more in this virtual version. Because the real life, sucks for them, but I can, the metaverse, I can do anything. And then there's a disassociation of the human condition for this virtual version of it. And then there's, I think, hopefully the utopian version of it, to where it does become an augmentation and an expansion of what that social exchange can do and lead to. So, right now, and some people in our jump DAO, it's people all over the world, and it would be physically and fiscally impossible for us to come together and have the exchanges that we do, but in different versions of a metaverse, we're able to do those. And I think we're all the wiser and the better for it. And so I think someone had asked, some Web3 metaverse, type experiences. Some name brands you might be hearing out there are Decentraland, the Sandbox. Like those are kind of Minecraft-like voxel style art. So it's rudimentary design, but the way you access it is in a very Web3 way. You're going through and you're buying land, and it's all on the blockchain, and you're designing your pocket within the metaverse. And brands are swooping in right now. I'm sure we have some brand marketers and advertisers on here, and everyone's trying to set up their version in the metaverse. It's the Walmart store in the metaverse. It's Target in the metaverse. It's Gucci in the metaverse. And so I think that that's a big push right now, which is a bit of a bummer for someone like myself, because as big money starts to swoop in, does that push out the creativity and cultivation of kind of like this cool underworld? I say underworld in a good version of the term, because if so much money comes in and people do come into this metaverse and they're like, oh, okay, so it's like a fake Target and a fake Gucci, and I dress my fake self. Is that it? Is this the metaverse? That's where I think that there's going to be a crossroads that we're approaching.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. And that's kind of a good segue, actually, because it's like talking about that social exchange, and with all these, some of the largest technology firms jumping into the metaverse and investing heavily into it. And some people have already posted some things about, like with Disney, Walmart, you have Nike recently, things like that. And there's a plethora of them. But that's interesting because like that community we're speaking about and going into, like that Web3 community, where all of us here are Web3 degenerates, but that's that kind of that vibe that it's had right now. It's been very collaborative, very open, things like that. But that's kind of the sense that we've had as well, as like all their brands getting into it. How is that going to commercialize the space? So I'd love to kind of like open that conversation up around community, because I think if we can help others understand like how to maximize that, your approach into Web3, because it is different than a normal marketing campaign. You're talking one-to-one versus one-to-many, and you're moving from audience segments to members of your community. So like, how do someone want to kind of pick up the ball and run with that? Like, how do we look at community? What would someone would share something that would help these brands, agencies alike to understand, like, hey, if we're putting together an NFT, or not NFT strategy, but you would, a Web3 strategy, which may be an NFT and other things like that, and creating a community, what would be some of your advice, or like, how do you see the Web3 communities today?
I'd love to pick up the torch there.
Go, Andrew.
So going back to the read, write, own example, I'd also like to separate casual conversation from commercial conversation. Nowadays, the brands speak commercially, the users listen, and with social media, they got to speak back. Now, on the casual side of things, there's a new phenomenon being born thanks to Web2, which is called parasocial behavior. It's when abstract concepts or stuff that isn't related to your everyday life has an impact in the way you behave yourself. It's kind of the relationship we have with celebrities or YouTubers even. Now, with the metaverse empowered by Web3, we as brands get to speak back to the community. Brands in Web3 are developing a very unique personality. Like you can see a punk profile picture or a Bored Ape profile picture, and you can sort of tell the personality of the people behind it. With Web3, brands get empowered to having a community and having a unique voice beyond what a board of directors or a creative director decides. Now your community is your voice and they represent you as much as your commercial actions.
That's awesome. That kind of opens up a can of worms a little bit because I'm thinking about how DAOs work and decentralized autonomous organizations, but we'll put that on the side for now. Jeff,
Real quick on that, I just wanted to draw some parallels to the scary world of Web 2. And please remember, when we were first standing up Facebook pages and Twitter accounts and blogs, if you don't remember these conversations, I mean, some of us had PTSD from these conversations, which is, the brand, right? This is CMO level talk. Wait a second. People are going to be able to say anything they want about us, right? That was we've all gotten comfortable with it, but it was like, they're going to be able to leave comments. They're going to be able to create content. And this whole idea of UGC, user generated content, was incredibly hard to get our head around. And then what Alejandro's sort of touching on here is now we have user generated capital or ownership. And there's this almost this co-ownership between the brand and its customer base or fan base or what have you. And so previously in Web 2, we're sort of co-creating content together and story. And it's not like that goes away. We actually turbocharge that a bit and we co-create content, co-create stories even more so, but we do it under this alignment of co-ownership as well, which creates a powerful incentive. And we've already seen that with some of the examples like Bored Ape Yacht Club that Alejandro mentioned, but just wanted to draw that parallel to Web 2, that there's this whole new world of scary stuff, but we've been there before.
That's a good little analogy or segue to that. Yeah, Dale, I wanted to kind of throw it back to you. Is there something, how do you, from your background, from being in the Mavs and now where you're at, Zealous, how do you see community building? How do you see people coming into these the Web3 space, and how do you think that could be the best experience for them?
Yeah, I think at the core of all of us and human behavior, we're in constant pursuit of something to complete us, and that's why some people, that's why luxury brands exist. So much money is spent on this watch versus that watch because I feel like that will complete me. And a lot of times, you get the watch and you're wearing it and you're like, wait a second, I feel as miserable as I used to. And so the next thing, what else is going to complete me, and so on. And I think at the core of that, it is going back to the community. So you might be wearing that watch to be in the fancy watch club in order to have access to a bunch of other bros who like fancy watches, and that's where your community, that in essence is what actually fills the hole in your heart. That's how it eventually gets filled. And I'm seeing that take place in so many interesting ways in this Web3 movement, because people are kind of coming out of the bushes and the recesses of things and finding themselves, even if it is over what looks to be like a dumb JPEG club. They bought into a thing, and yeah, they own this, this image or this token, whatever. But what they really derive from that is that communal experience. So an analogy for this is, sports. The reason people wear sports, their hometown jersey, is to signal and affiliate, you like the Jets, I like the Jets, therefore we should be friends, or we have something in common. And that's what will fill them, not because they're wearing this jersey. And that's where I think like, I'll say the word fandom, but I don't mean like fandom as in rah rah, but just I think we're approaching a new age of fandom where it gets like niche on niche on niche, that people are able to really rally together and not just be fans of a thing as in, hey, we like the same thing. It's now being able to do something then beyond that. Let's build something upon our communal fandom. Let's go off and really help organize and find other people to do this in a way that a lot of Web2 stuff, Facebook fan groups and things like that approached, but taking it in a next level where there is an ownership layer added to it. There is maybe a little more incentive to putting in the blood, sweat, and tears, to push this thing into the greatest version it can be.
Yeah, to add on that, the kind of promise of the internet from the 90s era to the social era is that you can connect with people everywhere and find your tribe. If you're really into this specific artist, right, you can find your fellow fans and form a community. And people did create communities on Facebook, right? And then what did Facebook do is they, take that data and then they own the community, they own the relationships. And then if you're a fan of an artist on following on Spotify, that artist has no relationship with the fans. They're going through a third party. And as we've sort of seen the trends of Web3 move, I think some of it is kind of a reaction to where we've seen Web2 fail us in a lot of ways. I think where Web2's business model, and I think, Jeff, you talk a lot about this, the primary business model is advertising, right? And then we've seen the way advertising has maybe, divided us, and we're not in control of our data, and we're being served in a specific way. And for creators out there, they don't have that relationship to their audience. And we're seeing sort of a disarticulation where we want to go past the gatekeepers. We don't need Facebook to have our community. We don't need Facebook for our groups. We can start our own groups and we can have ownership instead of they monetize from us. If I want to support a creator, I don't want to have to listen to them on Spotify and they get pennies. I want to support them directly, and then they have a relationship with me and they can reward me, and I can, it's an exchange of value. And that is the sort of where Web3 is taking that promise of the internet that we've been talking about since the 90s and bringing it with technology into the modern times.
Oh, I love that. Love that. And this kind of, let's stay on this topic for like maybe another couple minutes here. I just want to dive into a little bit like the community aspect in sense of like how we all look at NFTs, right? Like Dale, you're joking about that, and people do say it a lot, it's just a JPEG. Like, why'd you spend so much money on this JPEG, right? And they're not understanding like truly what's behind that, what's the utility, what's the access, what is it giving you, exclusivity, et cetera. And just like you said with that example of like your watches, same thing with people driving Mercedes-Benz or having a nice purse. It's the same difference in the sense of like that sense of belonging to a community, having that safety of feeling you are seen, right? And then also just kind of thinking about it from a standpoint of how do we get brands to better understand the metaverse and just Web3 space and how people are interacting with it, because some of the hacks, in a sense, I think some people have asked, like, what do we do? And we'll kind of get to that too as well, like, how do you learn more? But something I just want to throw out there, and if you guys want to add to it, just about like, maybe describe a little bit more about NFTs, but I think of it as like the transparency and honesty, showing that first in coming, like we were talking about a second ago, Web2 came out with just revenue driven, Web3 has been community driven. But with that, you need to be forward with and being honest with your intentions, right? But that's creating vulnerability from you for that brand, but it's also creating that connection because it's a human component that we all need. So like, does anybody want to touch on NFTs? Because I know that's something that we are unpacking a lot here. Jeff, I'll call on you. Like, I know we're unpacking a lot here, Web3, describing what that is, blockchain enabled. We're talking about the metaverse and how that plays into it, but all these things in the metaverse are going to be NFTs. So do you mind, Jeff, just kind of giving a quick example or sharing kind of a visual so people can kind of understand and connect the dots?
Yeah, so you kind of started out that the conversation there with community, right? So I want to come back to that, and I want to make sure we talk about community, because community is something we've used for the better part of 10 or 15 years, and we never really achieved that and Facebook told us, build communities, get all of your fans on a Facebook page, and then what do? They kill organic reach. Community is worthless. And then you have to, double down on advertising. So I want to come back to that aspect of community, but then to quickly define it, an NFT, 3 words, non-fungible token, basically means a unique thing, right? Like, but if Blaine and I actually have the same sweater, nice Atom Bomb Squad sweater, great NFT project, since we're talking about NFTs. And by the way, if we're looking for examples of brands that are transitioning from Web 2 to Web 3, that sort of legacy, Atom Bomb Squad is by far the hundreds. Is by far one of the best projects to be following, because that's if you're not familiar with the brand, they've been around a long time, and now they've started making moves into Web 3. So that's your case study. Just follow them. But to describe, so if Blaine and I have the same Atom Bomb Squad sweater, it's basically, we each have sort of a representation of the same thing, but they're not the same thing, right? Especially as we wear them over time, and they, Blaine washes his and I never wash mine. And then they become very different, right? So NFTs are unique digital things. And so that means almost everything can become an NFT. It's not just art, right? It's literally everything. And then when we tie that to communities, and what's unique about the sort of the collision of this concept of communities and NFTs is that NFTs, a community of people holding NFTs, it's like a social graph. It's Web3's base layer. Communities actually become the platform. So in Web 2, we built a community on a platform. So we built a Facebook page or a Facebook group or a Reddit channel or whatever on a platform. That's Web 2. In Web 3, you build the community is the platform, and you build on top of that. And so again, these concepts are really hard to talk about because you have to also experience. It's like trying to describe email when you've never used email before. But if a community holds an NFT and that community is the platform, that community basically can move freely around the internet together. Why? Because instead of going to an app, and you'd see this on OpenSea, if you go and try it, you don't log in with username and password where the app holds is the database, right? The blockchain is the database and the NFT is the social graph. And so you can go to any app, you can go to Decentraland, you can go to any sort of social experience. And there's this whole world of apps that are coming down the pipeline. You connect your wallet instead of logging in with username and password. Then the app reads what's in your wallet and it says, oh, hey, everybody on this panel, we all hold the Jump NFT. And instantly we're portable around the metaverse. And that goes to one of the interoperable questions that was in the chat. And that's the power of community building around an NFT or a digital or a token, because that shared social graph is portable anywhere as the Web3 metaverse experience gets built out.
That's cool. No, that's great. Thanks, Jeff. And then just to put a bow on that, and we're going to transition a little bit to like how to get started and how to kind of feel your way through. Just as we mentioned, the non-fungible token, I like to mention this, like the fungible aspect. If it's fungible, it's an equal trade of value. So if you have $1, I have $1, we each exchange dollars, that's a fungible trade. But what Jeff was, what he was saying about the non-fungible, meaning each and every asset is unique, and it could be digital, it can be a physical asset. It's just pretty much the smart contract that is the behind that scene as the NFT. And so it can be the bridge between your physical world and also the virtual world. So just hopefully that explains a little bit more about NFTs, because I know that's been a buzz, but also just want to make sure that was clarified so that we all understand how we're interacting in the metaverse and why it's Web3. Instead of just being like a JPEG and copy and pasting that, what Jeff just mentioned, if you try to do that with the Jump token or a Jump NFT, that's obviously very easily invalid, and people wouldn't even see that as part of your wallet. And that's a whole nother discussion about wallets, and where kind of that's going as an identifier as you as individual, and it's also privacy compliant, so it kind of blows out cookies, and that's where Web3 is much more tangible to that value there. But now we got 10 minutes or so left, 10, 15 minutes if we want to stay on a little bit longer, but did want to kind of open up the floor to let's give some people some ideas of how to get started. I know we talked about this on Monday of do we do podcasts? Do you do these, read these white papers, et cetera? Who wants to kind of get cracking and just kind of share share some good tips and tricks to kind of get going?
I'd love to share a quick tip. This is just my personal journey, and everybody learns differently, but I'd say I probably just listened to podcasts for a year before I had a wallet or a token or a cryptocurrency or connected to a DApp or really did anything. Maybe I'm a slow learner and other people can get in faster, but I have found that the right set of podcasts has just been a wealth of information that I continue to listen to today. So I'll just kind of throw that out there and then pass it around the horn because there's a lot of ways to get started, but that was worked for me.
And before I throw it to Alejandro, I know you're going to go up here next, and I saw some in the chat. So yeah, we'll be sharing more information afterwards. So like podcasts, recommendations, white papers, or anything like that. Like we'll be sharing that in a follow-up email on probably like Friday or Monday. So just watch for that for the more details on there. But Alejandro, do you want to kind of add something to that?
I wouldn't want to confuse the message, but I'd actually go the opposite way that Jeff said. Because, for example, in my case, I did lurk the space for about 6 months before jumping in.
Yeah.
But what I learned compared to what I got to learn when I finally got involved and I created my wallet, and I made a ton of mistakes, of course, was a thousandfold more significant and more valuable to my journey in Web3. Like creating a wallet is free. You don't have to transact on Ethereum mainnet, which is the most popular blockchain that this whole Web3 movement is happening in. You can go ahead and experiment with a few simple services, like creating an ENS domain, which is very similar to a web domain. Swapping a simple token. It doesn't have to be a big sum. There's a few simple tasks you can do just to grasp the significances of this whole ecosystem and how interconnected everything is. Another one I'd recommend is going straight to Dune Analytics. You don't even have to have your own wallet to see the amount of data you can extract from a token.
So my tip is it's hard, man. Like it is like a dense, heavy space. Like I often think back, like it's like walking into a classroom and someone hands you a book on astrophysics and you're just like, huh? Because you can get super deep. There's tons of terminology and jargon and so on. So my tip is to just go slow and like do something. When we were chatting about this earlier, if someone says, hey, here's Web3 and here's all these links and listen to this podcast and listen to this guy and this gal, it feels like someone just handed you a huge bowl of broccoli and like, eat up, you got to eat the whole bowl to figure all this stuff out. And so I think if you love something, it could be golf, it could be cooking, it could be Nepalese tapestries, chances are there's already someone out there that has been trying to figure out how to migrate that interest into a Web3 way. So I would find whatever your interest is, seek that out and just take those bite-sized, pour some cheese sauce on the broccoli, just take one little floret at a time, because that's the only way. Otherwise your head will explode. I'm not a doctor, but if you just try and absorb everything that Web3 is, like your head will explode.
Yeah, and I think I'll throw it to you, Blaine, but I would say I'll add to that real quick, Dale, but that is like spot on. Like we all tried to be immersed ourselves in Web3 and it is mind blowing. It like can get really daunting. And once you go down that rabbit hole, it gets really exciting. But like you said, there's a lot of analogies, a lot of different spaces, because there's finance, all these different areas that like, if you're not interested in, still a lot to learn there. But Blaine, what would you kind of like want to recommend or add to that?
Just to add to that, I mean, it moves fast, and I will say, like, it is not very user friendly right now. As we like to say in the Web3 world, we all say we're early, and we say it for a reason, because the way I see, we're in the Friendster, MySpace era of social for Web3, right? The infrastructure is not built. A lot of these technologies, like we're saying, are not as efficient as we'd like them to be and are more costly than we'd like them to be. I say that as a little asterisk because it's important to use it yourself. I'm not going to explain to someone why TikTok is cool. You have to download the app, open it, get the algorithm going, and experience it for yourself. It's the same thing with Web3. You really need a wallet to get an NFT, connect to a Discord community. And that's just where we're at right now. Again, that might be my space. In the future, we could be way further on. It could be way easier. So like Dale said, it may not be the time. You may be in the learning phase, but to really involve yourself in the space, you need to kind of take those actions and start using it so that you can have those brain explosion emoji moments for yourself.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I don't want to close it up too early. We could shut down here, but I kind of did want to take a question or two from the chat here. So just kind of something I was thinking about. We're just looking at, like, there's a lot of players in the space in Web3. I would just say Web3, not just the metaverse, but like, who do you see is coming up top, or who's coming up and coming from like a metaverse perspective? Like, Nike acquiring the RTKS studios with like their kind of expansion there, Disney, Walmart doing their own thing as well. Like, who do you see someone doing it really well? Because we've seen some players like Pepsi and things like that, and their NFT launch just bombed because of all the bots and how they kind of set that auction up. But anybody have any good like brands or activations in the space that you'd want to kind of highlight? Because I think some people could kind of do some research and kind of do their own digging there, but just to kind of get the ball rolling.
I have a quick over the top comment, and then
yeah,
everyone else can jump in the scrum. I must be hungry because all I have are like food metaphors, but I would call what we're into now is like the cotton candy phase. So it's like fluffy, sugary, but there's not much substance to it. And I think some of that substance and the beefier, meatier things, they're currently like being worked on in the background by some super smart people who are really, making their brains sweat. But I think that's why everything you're seeing now is that cotton candy. It's like JPEG stuff, and it's like my virtual Nikes and this and that. And you almost need the cotton candy phase to work out the jank and the kinks, and to do a bit of like very, very low barrier entry testing of the structure of the blockchain itself, and then allowing the smoothing of the edges. So for the real mass onboarding to come out. And like you're seeing this, just glancing at the chat, you're seeing regulators that they are completely blindsided, that they themselves are trying to catch up with this to figure out like, okay, we see this cotton candy stuff, but like, where is this going? And that's why you're starting to see just this week, 3 kind of mega announcements as far as like official clarity and rulings of like, what is an asset, what is security. And I'm sure every CPA that's being handed a bunch of like email receipts of NFTs that some people have bought, that they're just like, I have no idea what you're talking about right now. But that is the future, as people's interests are not into the stock market and not into getting 0.015 interest in their savings and loan bank account, that they are wanting to explore this different version of things. That's what excites me, is seeing what the beefier version of blockchain and Web3 is going to be.
Yeah, Alejandro.
I wanted to comment a funny story. There's a rumor that the only reason Disney made Frozen was because whenever you would search Disney Frozen, nothing would come up around the myth that Walt Disney had frozen himself. This leads to, like, Disney recently announced that they were working on a metaverse team. I don't know what that means, but what I do know is that Disney has the power of storytelling behind them, and they know how people think and how to rally people behind a narrative. The fact that they're trying to get into the metaverse makes me, in a way, fearful and in a way excited. Because if I trust someone to know what this whole thing means beyond just a VR experience, it's Disney.
No, that's cool. Jeff, are you going to chime in there? I would also, before you do, I would want to say we are getting a lot of chats and a lot of questions and whatnot. If you all want to send in questions, you're more than happy to. We can fire back some of these answers to you all with the panelists we have here. So if you do want to send your questions in, send it to events@DFWIMA.org. I'll put it in the chat in a second here, but I just want to preface that as people are kind of starting to drop off here, but there's a ton of questions that we can't get to. And this is a conversation that we could have for hours, to be honest. But hopefully you're all taking away a little bit of like, now what is Web3 and where is that in the metaverse and how that fits into the game, into like marketing. But Jeff, I'll throw it back to you. And then Blaine, if you want to close out too, I'll let you have a little bit of time.
Yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and just sort of reiterate that. And I feel like I can say this because I spent the last 15 years in Web 2. And so I saw how we talked about community for the last 15 years. But another way to get started, and a very important way to get started, is to start to revisit community building strategies, and thinking about actually investing in building community on behalf of sort of brands or agencies investing in sort of building out community building services and models of that sense. So it's just like, that's a need that the Web3 ecosystem presents, right? And so I just always throw that out as another place to sort of get started that's a little bit more familiar, and just sort of center ourselves that we need to think about these community services or teams within our brands. Over to you, Blaine.
Yeah, for me, and I wanted to call this out because I think it's always important to say is, as the marketers and advertisers that will hopefully most likely be helping build this space over the next 5 to 10 years, I want us to think about, what we want. Some of these examples that we're seeing right now are recreations of what we already have. Okay, Samsung has a store and then they build it inside the metaverse so they can sell you more phones. The same thing. It's just advertising. Now, experiential is kind of cool. But I mentioned that because I always think of technology as neither inherently good or bad, but it can be sort of skewed one way. So Web 2, as we've seen, it has the power to, isolate us, make us addicted, and divide us. Or it has the power to connect us, bring us together, enrich our experiences. And that's something I wanted to just kind of call out. And speaking to the metaverse side, I'm always so intrigued by the company Niantic. They're the company who does Pokemon Go, and they're building more experiences. But what I love about them is they're not about isolating people in their homes with a VR headset. And we don't want to create a world that's just escaping always from reality. We want it to enrich our reality. And sometimes that can be playing games with friends who might live in another state, right? You don't get a chance to see them all the time. And what Niantic does with Pokemon Go is gets you out into the world, moving your body. Right now it's catching Pokemon, but it's very simple to see how that could be similar to like when you go in a museum in a foreign country and you listen to the audio giving you descriptions of the paintings you're seeing, giving you history. As you're moving your way through the world, we're getting into sort of AR and audio experiences where it can enrich your world. You can learn about the architecture, you can learn about the space around you. And those are things that really excite me about the metaverse.
Love it. Love it. I'll close up here. So I just want to thank you all for joining and being our all-star panelists today. And also thanks to everyone that joined. Hopefully you came away learning something. Hopefully this was an interesting, webinar, and thanks for spending your lunch hour with us if you're in the Central Time Zone. But like I said, if any questions you have, please feel free to reach out, events@DFWIMA.org. We'll send some follow-ups to all you, and then we'll share some resources in next week with some of the podcasts, things to do, and how to listen and how to get involved. Really, there's no wrong way to do so. Like Alejandro said, you could be kind of lurking, jumping in some communities and just kind of seeing what's going on. You could take a page from Jeff and start listening to some podcasts and really deep dive into that and just kind of get your understanding and your foundation built out. But really, hopefully you all kind of came away learning a little bit something. I would definitely look into blockchain because that is the enabling of everything we're talking about here. And I think that will really help solidify some of the connections and the dots to put together. but yeah, no, I hope if you anything else, we're looking forward to the next upcoming events. So if we're gonna have Rangers outing the Friday, April 1st, it'll be the second game of the season. And then our EMA is coming back. So we're gonna be doing a little bit differently this year. It's not gonna be virtual. We are gonna be doing it in person, but we're actually switching up the venue. So we'll be doing it at the Henry. We'll be doing an outside like patio kind of award ceremony. So it'll be a little bit different vibe. So hopefully if you can all make, that's gonna be more exclusive too. We're not gonna be able to house 300 people. It'll be about half that. So please sign up today, get in there. If you're not registered as a member, please do so as well. So you can stop paying for these as non-members. And then you can get more information and get connected, just like we were talking about. It's a community. So it's a community with purpose too. So hopefully you all feel that and you can go jump in. So again, thank you, Jeff, Dale, Alejandro, and Blaine for your time. It was a great chat. Have a good one, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Jeff is going into the metaverse. See ya, Jeff.
I learned it's pronounced DFWIMA.
WIMA, it is.
Same.
Yeah, that's the way we do it. That's the way we do it here. Dallas Fort Worth IMA. That's the way to go.
I learned it's pronounced DAO, not DAO. Chris, I should have run that by you.
But both are acceptable. I've seen people use a ton of different pronunciations.
Yeah. I call it DAO. It's easy DAO.
Yeah.
DAOs, NFTs. We got all the analogies in the world for you.
Technically in Spanish, it's DOA. Like you move around the letters.
I said it wrong then. And you guys, well, I'll talk to you all soon, and we'll talk in the metaverse with some of you, and we'll get on Discord and jump. So we'll chat later.
See you around.
See you in the metaverse, everybody.
Adios.
Adios.
Peace.